What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, and today we'll be talking about Deadbeat. So naturally, we'll be talking about dark magic, polka music, and zombie dinosaurs rampaging through the streets of Chicago. Before we do, though, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below. It helps out our channel a ton. And feel free to follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy, or just look up Fantasy Files Podcast in the search. We have some great content coming up for you guys. I am reviewing each Dexter episode as it releases on Showtime. So if you are into that show, be sure to check those out. We have Jade Legacy coming up, as well as Voice of War by Zach Argyle, and more Lightbringer episodes. We have some shorter, spoiler-free reviews. And of course, more Dresden Files on the way. So hit that notification icon so that you can see when we post new stuff. We also have a video for the Phoenix Rescue Mission charity that has gone up. We would really appreciate it a lot if you guys would share the link that's in the description for that video. It helps people in need get food for their families this holiday season. We also answer a bunch of really fun spoiler-free book-related questions in that video, so definitely check that out. It's a lot of fun. We're going to try something new with our podcast episodes for a little while and see if it is something that you guys like. We're going to split this episode into 3 or more parts, each with about 2 of our usual podcast topics per video. So it would be like characters and favorite moments, world building and magic. They would all just be separated into different episodes. We're going to release them throughout the week, with our final part being released on Saturdays as usual. We're doing this so that the episodes are in more bite-sized chunks for you guys. So definitely let us know what you think about this. If it's something you like, we'll keep carrying on that way. If it's something you don't like, we'll just go back to the normal 2.5 hour podcast episodes and uploading them as a whole thing. If you guys think we should do something different, then definitely let us know. We put up a poll on Twitter recently asking this question, and it was super informative. So if you guys want to see us doing something different, if you want to see a different format for this podcast, then definitely let us know. We're super open to feedback from the community. And, we just want to make a good show for you guys. So definitely weigh in on that. Let us know in the comments. Let us know on Twitter. There's even an email listed down below if you want to get a hold of us that way. Before we start going into Deadbeat, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been reading this past week. Gabe, you read or you listened to the audiobook of Voice of War. What did you think of this book?
I loved this book. To me, it was like a mixture of Jade War and Mistborn. At least I would say maybe in the magic system itself, which I thought was really cool. The premise was incredible. A lot of plot twists, a lot of fun. It was kind of mysterious, and there's a lot of things that really drew me in pretty hard. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to just about anybody.
Yeah, this is an indie kind of self-published book by an author named Zach Argyle. We're going to be having him on the show when we do a review for the second book. It's really a good book. I kind of thought it was a mix between Mistborn and Lightbringer. It's set in a fantasy world with just a really cool magic system, and the characters are super lovable. That was one thing that really hooked me on that book was the characters for that book, and the action. The action is really, really cool.
Super good. Yeah.
After we had read Jade War, I continued on with the Wheel of Time and read the third book, The Dragon Reborn. And I had heard from a lot of people that this is their favorite book, and I totally get why. Like,
yeah.
I really, really liked the third book. I recently put up the like kind of review, I guess, for like a spoilery review for Eye of the World. I've recorded the one for Great Hunt, the second book that's going to go up soon. And then for The Dragon Reborn, if any of you listeners are interested, I'm actually going to do a small podcast episode with the guys from Fantasy for the Ages. And we're all going to talk about The Dragon Reborn, and that'll be like beginning of December sometime. It won't take place of like our normally scheduled podcast episodes. It'll just be something extra that'll get uploaded for you guys to enjoy. And then Gabe has been listening to me rant about this for the past several days now, because this weekend the Wheel of Time TV show dropped on Amazon Prime, and yeah, big surprise, I didn't like it. I think they do a lot of things that are very different from the books for no reason. I certainly understand making changes in order to fit, a couple books into one season, but there was just some things that were changed that were like, when if you're taking something out from a book, you shouldn't be putting something in to replace it that is not from the book. I think if you want to cut certain scenes out in order to fit, that's fine, but don't take, someone's favorite scene out just to put in a scene that never happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was all through the first episode. Like 99% of the first episode didn't even happen in the book. And then the second episode got a lot better, and I started to think, and really I should say after the first episode, I stopped watching for a minute. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to continue with this. Like, this is really bad. But then I was like, I should give it another chance. I'm going to go on with the second episode and see how it goes. And the second episode was really, really close to the books. It was like not one for one by any means, and there was definitely some liberties taken, but it was close enough for me to give it a pass. And so I went from there to the third episode. I'm like, well, maybe it just gets better and better from here on out. And the third episode was even worse than the first one. Like, literally almost nothing that happened in the third episode happens in the books at all. Like, it's completely different. They majorly changed one of the characters, Tom Maryland. I don't know if you remember him from when you read Gabe, but he's like kind of the bard character, the Glee Man.
Yeah.
And yeah, they completely changed his character. They basically made him a cowboy.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, okay, like I'm just like, you guys are going so far off the path that I really just don't want to watch this. And so, yeah, I might try the fourth episode just to see what happens, but I'm pretty sure that this TV show is DNF'd. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure I'm just one thing that makes me happy is I have only just finished the third book in the Wheel of Time. And so I have 11 or 12 more books to go. I have a lot of source material to get through. And so I'm really not too worried about the TV show. I still have the books and I can always just read the books, which is mostly what I do anyway. So, the Wheel of Time TV show was a little bit of a disappointment for me, but I'm just as happy to just keep going with the books. And I know a lot of people really have liked the TV show, mostly people who haven't read the books, but even some book readers have really enjoyed the TV show. So I don't want to bring anybody else's enjoyment of the TV show down. But I feel like I would be dishonest if I said that I really didn't like it.
Yep.
Last thing I want to talk about here is this book that I've been reading. We talked about it last week, called Pines by Blake Crouch. It's part of the Wayward Pines trilogy. And like I told you earlier, Gabe, the amount of time that I've spent on this book is 3 nights, maybe like 2 or 3 hour reading sessions each.
Yeah.
And I am almost done with this book. Yeah. I am almost completely done with this book. And I've just blown through it. And it is so good. I'm not going to go into the whole thing I went through last week because I went on way too long about this book, but it is so good. The mystery just keeps turning. There's so many plot twists. There's so many, and it just keeps you guessing the whole way. And then I got to a part the other night where I'm a little bit more than 3/4 of the way through the book. And there is I don't think this is too spoilery, but there is a purge aspect to this book. And when that came about, I was like, I was already sold on this book, but I'm like, this book was like made for me because I love the Purge movies, and just that part of the book really just made me super happy.
Nice.
Yeah, you're gonna have to read it, dude. I think you're really gonna like it.
I need to read it and I need to watch it.
Yes, I should go back and watch the TV show because I think I watched it like right when it first came out. So I hardly remember any of it, and I don't think I watched the whole thing. So I definitely want to go back and watch that after I finish the book, because I don't want to get spoiled on anything that happens in the future of the books. But I remember it being a really good TV show. All right, so let's go into our spoiler section. If you haven't read Deadbeat, then this is not the video for you, unless you want to completely get spoiled. But if you haven't read this book, I recommend that you go read it and come back later. And this is your spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. Okay, so Gabe, what were your, after rereading this, first of all, how many times do you think you've read Deadbeat?
I would probably say this is maybe the 3rd time, I would think.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And I remember reading it, the last time I read it was quite a while back, and I really enjoyed it, of course. I love the Dresden Files, but I got this reread, I got so much more out of it that I didn't the last 2 times, like so much more. Like it was crazy how much more I got, and it just shed a light on how freaking incredible of a writer Jim Butcher is. Like I was just enamored with it, and I was like smiling and laughing and sad and crying and like all this stuff that, like, mind you, I probably did that last time, but it was very potent this time, and there was a lot more substance to it when I read it this time. So I love this book. It's easily up there now anyways, and one of the best Dresden Files books that I've ever read.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I took such a long for me, probably not
Yeah.
long for most people, but I took such a long break from the Dresden Files books. And even when we started this podcast, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do Dresden Files right away.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that I had that break and that I've come back now, because getting into Deadbeat this time, I was like, wow, like this is really one of the best
Yep.
Dresden Files books.
Yep.
And I don't think that I had ever really thought that before.
Yeah.
I think that Deadbeat was always kind of like, one of the books like Turncoat or Small Favor, where you kind of forget about it, or at least that's how it always was for me.
Yeah.
But going back into this time, I was like, oh yeah, this is a really, really fantastic read. So it has a unheard of 4.9 on Audible, with hundreds, if not more, reviews.
Yep.
That is unheard of. I have never seen something on Audible have a 4.9.
Yeah.
Like, most things on there, the best you're going to see is like a 4.6 or a 4.5. For it to get a 4.9 with that many reviews, it means that this is a near perfect book,
Yeah.
which I would agree.
Yep.
Right. I probably wouldn't have agreed, a few months ago before I read this, or
Yep.
even a month ago. But reading it this time, I'm like, yeah, this is a near perfect book, let alone a near perfect Dresden Files book. So yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised with it. This is also most often people's, I use this term loosely, but their favorite Dresden Files book. Whenever people kind of talk about Dresden Files with somebody who hasn't read the series, they usually bring up Deadbeat, because there's so many moments, like Harry riding the dino, like, oh, you got to read
Yep.
this book, like the
Yeah.
main guy rides a dinosaur in it. And people put it up there with changes and stuff.
Yeah.
So, this is really a cornerstone of the franchise.
Totally agree.
Okay, so this book was used as a new intro to Dresden Files. Basically, what happened around this book was going to be proven guilty, and then Deadbeat was going to be the next one, and it was going to be Molly riding the dinosaur with him. What ended up happening was the publisher came to Jim and was like, hey, your books are going to go into hardcover, and we need a book that is good for new readers, something that someone who's never read the series can pick up this book and immediately get everything and kind of learn what's going on.
Yeah.
And so Jim had decided to take Deadbeat and put it before Proven Guilty, and kind of use this book as a gateway for new readers. Because if you notice, this book, you could read it having read none of the other books. It very much stands by itself.
Yeah.
The entire world gets explained to you, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And it really starts from like the ground up, and tells you everything you need to know about this world. And so I always think that's a super interesting note about this book. Butters is kind of a part of that in this book. He is used as, you remember we were talking about like the idiot rule,
Yep.
how, Harry is basically Bob's idiot and Bob kind of explains all the magic stuff to him so that we
Yep.
can understand. And so Butters is the one who is kind of the idiot. He's part of the idiot rule in this book. And so all throughout the book, Harry is explaining to him how magic works and how the world works around magic, and what all these different like zombies are and necromancers. He's explaining all this stuff to Butters, and what that's for is for the new readers who are coming to the series. He used that device really, really well.
Yes.
All right, so I went back and looked at some of our rankings, and the last one that I have, tell me if you think this looks correct. As we've read 5 books so far, and from our least favorite to our most favorite so far has been Stormfront coming in at book number 5, Grave Peril coming in at number 4. Full Moon coming in at number 3, Blood Rights coming in at number 2, and Death Masks coming in at number 1.
Yes, that's perfect. That's exactly how I would order it. I was looking on my phone to try and see what, see the order of things, but that's exactly how I would put it.
Where do you think, if we add a number 6 to this list, where would you vote that Deadbeat falls?
Oh, on the top for sure. Ahead of Death Mass. 100%.
Okay.
100%.
For sure. Yeah. I was definitely gonna vote for either 1, 2, or 3, depending on what you said.
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah,
I think it earns the rank of number 1 for sure, man. I think
Yeah.
this, and the other ones are great. Like they're not like bad
Yeah.
books, but I think this one really sets itself aside in a really good way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a really phenomenal book, and it certainly earns that top spot.
Yep.
So let's talk about some of the world building here. Something that I was kind of thinking about during this book is that with this series, Jim has really made kind of a tall order for himself. He makes this series where magic is prevalent throughout Chicago and really the world, but since we're in Chicago, magic is a not super uncommon thing. However, the normal people of Chicago don't really notice it. They don't notice this supernatural world that's kind of around them.
Yeah, and so let me just add to that really quick. They try so hard to deny all the magic stuff, and they really work at like trying to justify it in a way that they can understand. That was the word that I was thinking of. Justify it. And so like and in this book there's so much of that. Like always like something bad happens and it's like, "Oh, it was a terrorist attack." Crap like that like all the time. And so yeah.
I think at the end of the book they even kind of shovel it off as some sort of virus or disease that was going around.
Exactly.
And it was like messing with people's heads and stuff. And so, Jim had a pretty hard road ahead of him as far as making the reader believe that this world has a lot of magic, but also that the normal person doesn't know about it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a pretty tall order.
For sure.
And it would be really hard to convince your audience that that is reality.
Yeah.
But the way that Jim does it, the way that Harry explains it is so solid. And as soon as he explains it the way that he does in this book to Butters, it really cements it in your head that, yeah, it makes sense that this is the way the world is. I think that Butcher is super intuitive to the human psyche. He explores that a ton in his books, like you were just talking about denial, how people will see these things, but the farther removed they get from it, whether it's a week or a month or whatever, they'll start to tell themselves, no, that would be crazy if that's what I saw. Like that's not actually what I saw. It was, it was something else. It was a
Yeah.
flash of lightning, or it was whatever. And
They
anything to
rationalize it.
explain away. Yeah, they rationalize
Yeah.
it. Really anything to explain away the supernatural. There are a couple times where this breaks down a little bit, like in my opinion, with the end of Battleground. I think everyone should have been on board with the supernatural
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
that point.
Yes, I
But
know. It's ridiculous that they weren't, dude. And like you said, I see in the notes here, like, that does seem like a loophole. Like it was
yeah,
so extravagant and so like much where you're just like, I don't think that they could not believe that.
yeah. Let me read a couple things from the book here where Harry is talking to Butters,
Okay. Yep.
explaining the world. Okay, so Harry and Butters are talking, and he's telling Butters that people see things all the time. They just don't talk about it because they'll get locked up in an insane asylum or whatever. And just like Butters did when Butters saw the vampire bodies, and he wrote them down as definitely human-like but not human.
Yeah.
He got locked up for a while, and so then Butters says, "Yeah, I guess I can understand that. What about regular people who see things like sightings and close encounters and stuff?" I blew out a breath. That's the second thing you have to understand. People don't want to accept a reality that frightening. Some of them open their eyes and get involved like Murphy did, but most of them don't want anything to do with the supernatural, so they leave it behind and don't talk about it, don't think about it. They don't want it to be real, and they work really hard to convince themselves that it isn't. And that's what we were talking about,
Yep.
being in denial. And we see that with Lamar in this book,
Yeah.
the paramedic guy. We see it a little bit with Rollins. Like he's seen some weird stuff, but he just wants to move on with his life. And so we see these people who know they've seen something, but enough time removed, they're kind of like, did I see something? But also, even if they do believe they saw something, they know that they could not convince anybody else. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they know that they would be looked at as crazy.
I was just saying, imagine how scary that would be. Like to see something and in your head, like, I know that I saw it. I know what I saw. I know I'm not crazy. I don't see things. And then having
Right.
to think about the fact that like if I were to go tell this to somebody and you have to hold on to it because that's what
Yeah.
would happen. You'd get locked up or thrown away or whatever else because this dude's crazy. It's like I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about like if that were to happen to me, like that would be a pretty tough thing to live with for a while. You know what I mean? Like I would be freaked out, especially if I couldn't share it.
It isn't that crazy. And I'm a huge I'm really into aliens, and I think that I believe in
Yep.
aliens.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I've thought about that a lot. Like what if something ever happened, and like I've never seen anything crazy,
Yeah.
but when I was living in Colorado, I saw some really really weird things that happened in the sky,
Yep.
and I don't really talk about it because like who is going to believe me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I totally get this mindset of you really can't share it with anybody, and you really have to hold on to it. And you may be able to tell people that are like really close to you because they're your
Yeah.
friends or whatever, but they're not going to go spreading it to the news, or like
Yep.
because they know that the news wouldn't believe them or
Yeah.
anything. And they probably think their friend is crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
like, man, there's just no way. Like Jim Butcher almost makes this iron tight.
Yeah.
This idea of why the world doesn't recognize the supernatural. And he goes on to talk about Butters is saying, like, what about, like, you're telling me, like, a world, like the whole world who is devoted to science and understanding the world, we've covered almost every square inch of the earth, like, you're telling me that they don't have the insight to recognize the supernatural world, or, like, why haven't we found this yet? And Harry says, come on, Butters, look at history. How long did the scholarly institutions of civilization consider Earth to be the center of the universe? And when people came out with the facts to prove that it wasn't, there were riots in the streets. No one wanted to believe we all lived on an unremarkable little speck of rock in the quiet backwater of one unremarkable galaxy. The world was supposed to be flat, too, until people proved that it wasn't by sailing all the way around it. No one believed in germs until years and years after someone actually saw one. Biologists scoffed at tales of wild beastmen living in the mountains of Africa, despite eyewitnesses' testimony to the contrary, and pronounced them an utter fantasy, right up until someone plopped a dead mountain gorilla down on their dissecting table.
Yep.
Man, that is really good.
Yeah.
World building. And I classify this as world building because it's the reason why the world doesn't believe in the supernatural, and it has to do with the relationship between the normal people and the magical community. And I think that Jim is very good at world building in general, creating things like the Fae and all these different places in the Never Never, and the vampire courts and all this stuff. But one thing I really realized in this book is that his world building of just Chicago or Earth is really, really powerful. And he backs up this kind of conundrum with iron tight reasoning. And so, yeah, I really, really enjoyed this part of the book, and I really forgot how significant that is, and how much this book really set a foundation for the rest of the series, because the rest of the series kind of sits on this idea of the outside world not knowing about the supernatural and why. And so, yeah, I really didn't realize how foundational this book was until this last reread. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons to keep up with all this amazing content we have on the way. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy and interact with us here in the comments on YouTube. We will see you in the next installment of Deadbeat, where we continue with more topics relating to the book. Until next time, time is a river, life is a journey, and the door is ajar.
Love it.